Chapter 1. A Disturbance at the Bellamy Club. The Bellamy Club, nestled discreetly behind wrought iron gates in London's Mayfair district, was a place of quiet elegance. Its Persian rugs were vacuumed twice daily, its port decanted by men whose grandfathers had poured drinks for kings, and its members, aristocrats, industrialists, and men with old money and older secrets, enjoyed the comfort of being unbothered by the world outside. At precisely 8:30 on a rainy Wednesday in October, a silver Bentley rolled to a gentle stop in front of the club's entrance. From it emerged a portly, fastidious man with an egg-shaped head and the most impeccable moustache in all of England. Hercule Poirot adjusted the cuffs of his dove-grey gloves and ascended the club steps with the confident air of a man who had solved more murders than most people had eaten dinners. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," said the doorman, straightening slightly. "Bonsoir," Poirot replied. "I believe I have been summoned." "You have indeed, sir. Lord Bramhurst is expecting you in the oak lounge." Poirot gave a short nod and was shown inside, where firelight danced in mahogany panels and leather-bound books guarded the walls like silent sentinels. Lord Henry Bramhurst stood by the fireplace, scotch in hand, his expression pinched and his cravat askew. He was a man in his 60s, barrel-chested and crimson-cheeked, with the unmistakable demeanour of someone not used to being flustered. "Poirot," he said without preamble, "something damn strange has happened." "I gathered as much," Poirot replied, lowering himself delicately into a leather armchair. "Do enlighten me." Bramhurst downed his drink in one gulp. "Someone stole from me." "Indeed? And what was stolen?" Bramhurst walked to a sideboard, opened a lacquered box, and removed a small velvet case. He placed it in Poirot's hands. The detective opened it. Inside, a single sapphire cuff-link glinted in the light. "Where is the other?" "Gone. Vanished. Taken last night after the annual Bellamy dinner. I wore them both, matching pair, worth a small fortune. When I returned home, only one remained." "And you are certain you did not lose it en route?" "I never took them off. I removed them at home in front of my valet. The case had only one inside, and that's not all." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah." Two other members, Colonel Hensley and Mr. Gerald Wyatt, reported similar losses. Wyatt's gold cigarette case, Hensley's ruby signet ring, all disappeared sometime during or just after last night's dinner, and all were items worn or carried at the event. Poirot steepled his fingers. 3 missing valuables, each of some significance, each vanishing in a single evening. Curious, indeed. "It's not just the theft," Bramhurst growled. "It's the insult. The Bellamy Club prides itself on its discretion, its safety. Someone made a mockery of that. Under our very noses. Were there guests present?" "Only members and their +1s. Invitation only. 23 attendees in total." Poirot nodded slowly. "And has anyone noticed a pattern among the missing items beyond their obvious value?" Bramhurst frowned. "Not that I can see." "Then perhaps it is time I look for myself. I shall begin with the guest list, if you please." By morning, Poirot, hand in hand, a typed list of every person in attendance at the Bellamy dinner. Names both familiar and obscure, lords and baronets, bankers and barristers. beside each, a handwritten annotation in Bramhurst's spidery scrawl, "Good man, fellow of long standing," or in one case simply "Jew American." It was that last name, Raymond Kessler, that caught Poirot's attention. Not because of any particular crime, but because of the casual xenophobia of the note beside it, and because Americans had a knack for turning up where trouble followed. He tapped the name gently. "Who is this?" "Kessler," Bramhurst muttered. "Friend of Wyatt's. Apparently a collector of some kind. Antiques, jewelry, that sort of thing." Poirot's brow creased. Curious. He spent the next few hours interviewing the other two victims. Colonel Hensley, a man of rigid posture and fuming pride, insisted no one could have slipped into his private dressing-room. And yet his ring had vanished from his finger sometime between dessert and the post-dinner port. Gerald Wyatt, a nervous, balding fellow with a tendency to over-explain, said he'd noticed his cigarette case missing only the next morning. "I had it during dinner, certainly. I always tap it against my glass when I make a toast." Poirot, amused, made a mental note. Each man swore nothing else was taken, and that no one unusual had been seen. "No strange glances, no unfamiliar servants?" Poirot asked. Wyatt blinked. "Well, the pianist, perhaps. I didn't recognize him." "Pianist? Yes. The club hired one for ambiance. Played Debussy and some Chopin, I think. Young fellow. Very still. Wore gloves." Poirot sat up slightly straighter. "Gloves? Now that I think of it, yes. Unusual, isn't it? Très." That evening Poirot and Hastings returned to the Bellamy Club. The head steward met them at the door with his usual pinched expression. "Ah, yes, Monsieur Poirot. If I may say, the staff are quite on edge." Poirot gave a little bow. "I am certain they have nothing to fear, provided they are innocent." He moved directly to the drawing-room, where the piano sat gleaming beneath the soft lighting. A thin layer of dust now clung to the keys. Poirot touched one gently, D-sharp. From beneath the piano, something small and metallic reflected the light. He knelt and retrieved it. A thin shard of blue enamel, barely larger than a fingernail. Hastings leaned in. "What is it?" Poirot examined it closely. The edge of something beautiful, something broken. He tucked it away. The pattern on the shard, geometric floral, was unmistakably Art Nouveau. Back in his lodgings, Poirot laid out the facts before him. 3 missing items: a pianist with gloves, a shard of blue enamel beneath the piano, and 1 American, guest with a taste for collecting. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The sapphire cufflink was not simply stolen. It was singled out. The other cuff remained. Why? Why leave half a pair? Because it was a message, or a clue. Poirot leaned back in his chair, hands steepled beneath his chin. "The thief," he murmured, "wanted to be noticed." Chapter 2. Gloves and Glass Shadows. Morning light broke across Whitehaven Mansions as Poirot arranged his breakfast tray with mathematical precision. 2 boiled eggs, a buttered slice of toast, cut diagonally, naturally, a pot of Darjeeling, and the morning's Times. Hastings, as ever, was content with marmalade on toast and a casual scrawl of jam along his fingers. Poirot tapped the side of his egg. "Hastings, have you ever known a pianist to perform in gloves?" Hastings frowned mid-chew. Can't say I have. Sounds absurd. Exactement, Poirot murmured. Unless, of course, the pianist was not truly a pianist at all. Impostor? Perhaps. Or someone using the role to conceal their true purpose. Poirot's eyes sparkled. We must find this mysterious man in gloves. Hastings straightened. The club must have hired him through someone. An agency, maybe? Let us begin with the steward. By midday, Poirot and Hastings were once more ensconced within the refined walls of the Bellamy Club. The steward, a tidy man named Sims, wrung his hands nervously as Poirot pressed. "We received the musician through a reputable agency, I assure you," Sims said. "We've used them for years. Discreet, reliable." "The name?" Poirot asked. "Turner and Coles. They provide pianists, quartets, even harpists on request. Quite high-end." Poirot made a note. "And this pianist, name?" "Jeremy Doyle. Young, tall, very quiet. I didn't speak to him myself, but I can retrieve the booking slip." Within minutes, Poirot held it. "Jeremy Doyle, age 28, assigned for 3 hours, $10 fee, gloves not noted." "A professional pianist would not hide his fingers," Poirot said aloud. "Gloves would dull his touch." And yet no one commented until after the thefts were noticed. Hastings folded his arms. "So you think he used the music as cover to observe people? More than that. I think he timed his performance with precision. While eyes were drawn to the notes, fingers were free to act." The offices of Turner and Coles were nestled in a quiet lane off Piccadilly. Poirot and Hastings arrived mid-afternoon, the smell of rain still clinging to the cobblestones. The receptionist, a kindly woman with horn-rimmed spectacles, welcomed them politely and brought out Mr. Coles, a dapper man with a baton in his breast pocket. "Jeremy Doyle," he said with a frown. "Never heard of him." "But he was sent by your agency to the Bellamy Club." Coles looked affronted. "Impossible. I handle all bookings personally. May I see the slip?" Poirot handed it over. Coles examined it, face growing grimmer. "This is a forgery. The format is ours, yes, but the date is handwritten and the reference number is wrong." "A clever counterfeit," Poirot murmured. "Someone impersonated a Turner and Coles musician to gain entry." Coles set the slip down. "I do recall something odd. A young man came in last week, inquiring about playing at exclusive dinners. He said he'd heard of our clientele and wanted to audition. We refused. We don't take walk-ins. But he lingered, asking who we worked with." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "And you told him?" "Only in vague terms. Perhaps we said the Bellamy Club once hired us. He must have used the name to fake the booking." "Can you describe him?" Coles thought a moment. "Early 30s, pale, dark wavy hair, wore gloves. I remember that now. Said he had eczema." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Merci, Monsieur Coles. That is most helpful." That evening, Poirot reviewed the list of guests once more. One name tugged at his thoughts. Raymond Kessler, the American collector. "Let us pay him a visit," Poirot said, rising from his chair. Hastings looked surprised. "Do you think he's involved?" "I think, mon ami, that a collector often recognizes a rare piece when he sees one. And perhaps he has seen too much." Kessler's temporary London residence was a sleek modern flat just off Berkeley Square. The man himself greeted them at the door. Tall, tanned, with a practiced smile, and sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. "No gloves," Poirot noted. "Detective," Kessler said brightly. "Come in. You'll have to forgive the mess. Unpacking for Vienna." The flat, in truth, was immaculate. A few cases stood open near the sofa, neatly filled with rolls of silk, a chessboard, and a polished leather folio. "I understand you attended the Bellamy dinner," Poirot said. "Sure did. Nice crowd, though a bit stiff. Not much for conversation. But the port was excellent. Did you notice anything unusual?" Kessler paused. "Unusual? A man in gloves, perhaps?" Kessler's brow furrowed. "You know, now that you mention it, yeah, the pianist. Bit spooky, that one. Didn't blink much. Played well, though." "You are a collector of valuables, Mr. Kessler." "Antique jewelry, mostly. Napoleonic pieces, Art Deco cufflinks, early Fabergé." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And sapphire cufflinks?" Kessler laughed. "Ah, the Bramhurst pair. I asked him about them. Beautiful work. He said they were French, late 1800s. I offered to buy them a year ago. He refused." Poirot smiled faintly. "And after he refused?" "I let it go. I'm not in the business of twisting arms." Poirot tilted his head. "Did you happen to leave early?" "Before dessert. I had a headache." "May I ask, where were you between 10 and 11 that night?" Kessler didn't blink. "At my flat, packing." "Alone?" "Yes. Though my concierge saw me come in." Poirot nodded slowly. "Merci, Monsieur Kessler." Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Hastings scratched his head. "I can't decide whether I like him or distrust him. That is because he is both likable and dangerous," Poirot replied. "But I do not think he is our thief." "No, no. A collector does not steal half a pair. He waits for the whole. Poirot went to his desk and withdrew the tiny shard of enamel he had found beneath the piano. "This," he said, "was broken off something else." Hastings leaned closer. "Not the cufflink?" "No, I have examined the cufflink. It is pristine. This came from a different item. And so I ask myself, why was it there, unless it was dropped by someone retrieving or planting something else?" Hastings frowned. "So we're chasing someone who isn't a pianist, pretended to be one, wore gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, and planted a red herring." "We, Hastings. And that tells me one thing above all else." "What?" Poirot leaned forward. "He has done this before." Chapter 3. The Valet's Memory. The rain had returned to London, washing the streets in streaks of grey and silver. Poirot, ever unbothered by English weather, twirled his umbrella and stepped with precision through the puddles outside Lord Bramhurst's townhouse. "I would like to speak with your valet," Poirot had told the nobleman that morning. He may have seen more than he realized. Bramhurst, still simmering from the indignity of being robbed, had grumbled but obliged. "Fine. Merton's loyal. Been with me 15 years. But if you must dig through every pocket of my life, do so quickly." Now, in the house's drawing-room, Poirot sat across from a thin, pale man in his late 40s, with careful hands and a voice like folded linen. "Merton," Poirot began, "you were present when Lord Bramhurst returned from the Bellamy dinner." "Yes, sir." "And you assisted in his change of attire?" "Indeed, sir. Helped him out of his dinner jacket and cufflinks. He placed them in the velvet case himself." Poirot leaned forward. How many cufflinks? 2, sir. A matching pair. Then what happened? I left the case on his dressing table, went to draw the bath. When I returned, perhaps 5 minutes later, his lordship was already reading in bed. I noticed only one cufflink in the case. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you said nothing? Merton hesitated. I assumed his lordship had misplaced one, or perhaps set it aside. It wasn't my place to comment on such things unasked. Tell me, Merton, were you ever out of the room during the time between undressing and bathing, as I stepped into the hallway to fetch fresh towels? Poirot steepled his fingers. So, in theory, someone could have entered. Only briefly, and they'd have needed to be very quiet. Poirot gave a tight nod. Did you hear anything unusual? A creak? A whisper? Merton's eyes flicked toward the door. Now that you mention it, I heard a soft click, not loud, more like a latch catching. I assumed it was the window shifting. Poirot rose. Merci. That is all. You have been most helpful. As they exited the house, Hastings spoke first. A click. A quiet thief, Hastings. One with experience in bypassing locks. Perhaps a hidden servant's passage. Something subtle. Do you think Merton's lying? No, but he lacks imagination, as many honest men do. He cannot conceive of what he has not seen. They walked in silence for a moment. Poirot's gaze was inward. Hastings, imagine this. The thief enters Bramhurst's room while the valet is away. He opens the velvet case, removes one cufflink, only one, and vanishes. Why not both? Hastings shrugged. To delay discovery. Perhaps. Or to send a message. Half a pair, a signature. They reached the corner of Oxford Street. Poirot stopped and looked at the people bustling around them. Umbrellas raised, boots splashing, coats swishing in the wet. It is time, he said, to speak to someone not on the guest list. The Bellamy Club's kitchen sat in the basement, level. A warm, bustling space lined with copper pans and the scent of lamb roasting. Poirot moved past startled sous chefs until he found who he sought, the dishwasher boy. A wiry teen with freckles and a nervous look. The boy blinked rapidly as Poirot addressed him. You were working the night of the Bellamy dinner, yes? Yes, sir. And did you happen to see the pianist? The boy nodded slowly. He came through the back, said he needed to powder his nose before playing, and I pointed him toward the staff lavatory. He was weird, didn't talk much, gloves on the whole time. Poirot nodded. Did he have anything with him? A satchel, brown leather, kept it close. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Did you see where he went afterward? He came back out, nodded at me, and then, get this, he left the bag in the corner by the broom cupboard. Left it? Just for a bit, maybe 10 minutes. When he came back, he was sweating, even though it wasn't hot. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. Merci, he said, passing the boy a crisp coin. You have done well. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot spread out what he now called La Carte de Crime, a handwritten map of the Bellamy Club's floor plan. He marked the key moments in red ink. The pianist entered through the rear, he said aloud, used the staff lavatory, left his bag briefly, sweating upon return. He drew a line from the lavatory to a narrow corridor, behind the main ballroom. Oh, one rarely used. What if? Poirot murmured. He did not go to the lavatory at all, but used that time to slip through the club's underbelly. Hastings pointed to the floor plan. Could he have reached Bramhurst's locker? Or one of the dressing rooms? Possibly, but I believe he targeted specific guests, those with valuables known to be worn. He pulled out the list once again. Bramhurst, Hensley, Wyatt, all men who display their possessions, all creatures of habit. So the thief studied them. We watched them, knew when they'd remove their items, where they'd place them. Poirot leaned back, and he did not act alone. That evening, Poirot returned to the Bellamy Club alone. He wandered the main lounge slowly, pausing by the piano. He touched the keys again, soft, gentle notes, then knelt beneath the bench. A tiny scratch near the leg caught his eye. Not a break, but an indentation, as if something had snagged it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the enamel shard again. Still not from the cuff-link, he said quietly. But what was it from? He returned to the desk and opened the case once more. There, faintly, an oily smudge inside the velvet lining, barely visible, not from fingers, from mechanism. He touched the residue lightly and sniffed it. Grease, clockwork, perhaps, or a hinge. Then it struck him. The shard hadn't fallen. It had snapped off something. He stood abruptly. Mon Dieu! Later, that night, Hastings found Poirot pacing. What is it? I know what was hidden beneath the piano, Poirot said. Not a mistake, a clue, a plant. He held up the shard. It is from a box, an Art Nouveau music box, enamel casing, rare and hollow. Are you saying yes? The thief used a music box to carry the stolen items out, left it under the piano, unnoticed because it looked like part of the decor, collected it at the end, but it broke. Poirot nodded. A corner, chipped. In haste, he did not notice. Hastings' eyes widened. So, we find the music box. We find the thief, Poirot finished. He made a final call that night. To Raymond Kessler. Mr. Kessler, one final question. Do you own any Art Nouveau music boxes? There was a pause. I might, Kessler said cautiously. Why? Could you send me a photograph of them? Kessler sighed. I'm leaving for Vienna tomorrow, Poirot. Then I suggest you send it tonight. An hour later, a grainy photo arrived via telegram. 3 music boxes lined up on a shelf. One with golden swirls, one silver, and the third, blue enamel. Geometric design. One corner chipped. Poirot smiled, a slow, curling smile of satisfaction. But his smile faded just as fast. Kessler was not the thief, which meant only one thing. The music box was stolen too, and the real thief was still out there. Chapter 4. A Note in G minor. The next morning, Poirot found himself gazing out over the Thames from his study, the shard of enamel rolling between his fingers like a worry bead. Hastings entered, newspaper in hand, face pale. Poirot, he said, you'd better read this. Poirot took the paper. The headline blared, Pianist found dead in abandoned theatre. Mystery deepens at the Bellamy Club. He read in silence. Scotland Yard reports that the body of a man believed to be the pianist from the recent Bellamy Club dinner was discovered last night in the derelict Windermere Theatre. The deceased, as yet unnamed, was found with no identification, but was dressed in evening wear and gloves. Cause of death: apparent poisoning. No sign of struggle. A small music box damaged on one corner was found nearby. Poirot's fingers stopped rolling the shard. He lowered the paper slowly. "They have moved to cover their tracks," he said softly. "But the pianist was working for someone, wasn't he?" "Oui, Hastings. He was a tool, a skilled one, but disposable." Poirot stood and moved to the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "The music box, destroyed or left behind?" Hastings flipped the paper over. "It just says damaged. Scotland Yard has it now." "Then we must get to Inspector Japp." Inspector Japp greeted them at Scotland Yard with a weary shake of the head. "Blasted case," he muttered. "Fella had no papers, no wallet, no real fingerprints, gloves on even in death. But we matched his face to an old photo. Name's Declan Vale, small-time grifter. Did a stint in Brussels." Poirot's eyebrow twitched. "Brussels?" "Oui," he said softly. "I know the name. He once attempted to pass himself off as a minor viscount at a hotel in Ixelles. Got caught when he tried to pay with chess pieces coated in gold leaf." "Colourful," Japp grunted. "This time I think he got greedy. Looked like a simple theft, but when we found him he had nothing on him but this." He pulled out a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the music box. Blue enamel, Art Nouveau, geometric swirls, and unmistakably chipped in the same spot as the shard Poirot still carried. Poirot leaned in. "And was anything inside?" "Empty when we found it. But there's a false bottom, very clever. Someone had taken whatever was hidden inside." "Then the killer," Poirot said, "was not Declan Vale, but someone who followed him." Japp nodded. "We think he was meeting someone. 1 glass found at the scene, 1 dose of poison, instant effect." Poirot's voice was low. "A tidy murder. No scene, no scream, no evidence." Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot laid the shard against the missing corner of the music box photo. "It fits," he said simply. "But why leave the box behind?" Hastings shrugged. "Maybe it was too risky to carry." Poirot shook his head. "No. A thief of this caliber does not abandon tools, unless they are meant to mislead." He opened a notebook and sketched 3 circles: the Bellamy guests, the fake pianist, Declan Vale, the real mastermind. He connected Vale to the music box, and the music box to the Bellamy theft. "The thief," Poirot said, "used Vale to get into the club. Knew Bramhurst would wear the cufflinks, and likely others would wear valuables too." He tapped the second circle. "Vale stole the items, placed them in the box, and exited. Then he drew a thick black X through Vale's name, and then he died." Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings returned to the Bellamy Club. The main lounge was quieter now, echoing with the murmur of distant conversation and the clink of teacups. Poirot requested to see the guest book from the night of the theft. The steward, Mr. Sims, brought it promptly. Poirot flipped through the names, fingers pausing on each as though reading music. "See here, Hastings, Lord Bramhurst. Raymond Kessler, Dr. Agatha Pym, Julian Wyatt. Wait! Hastings interrupted. Julian Wyatt. Wasn't he wearing that antique signet ring? Oui. And it was also stolen. Poirot underlined the name. I remember. Him, Hastings said. Tight-lipped, military sort. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A former officer, served in India, known for discretion. And suspicion? No, but access. He would know how to move undetected. And unlike Bramhurst or Kessler, he is not wealthy. He is only adjacent to wealth. They requested to speak to Wyatt. Julian Wyatt arrived within the hour, dressed impeccably, walking with a cane he didn't seem to need. His voice was clipped. Gentlemen, Poirot greeted him with a bow. Monsieur Wyatt, may I ask about the events of the Bellamy dinner? I've already spoken to the police. Oui, but not to me. Wyatt gave a small smirk. Very well. Your ring, it was stolen? It vanished from my dressing table. I wear it on occasion, usually for such evenings. That night I took it off before dessert. Poirot tilted his head. Were you acquainted with Declan Vale? Wyatt's face was unreadable. Is that the pianist? Let us say, the man pretending to be one. Wyatt hesitated then. He looked familiar. Perhaps I saw him at a club in Mayfair a few months ago. Couldn't place him. Did you speak? No. Poirot studied him for a moment. You served in the military? Wyatt nodded. Yes, intelligence corps. Then you will understand why I say this. A clean operation leaves no mess. And yet, this one has been messy. Too messy. Wyatt's gaze was level. Your point? Poirot's tone remained light. If I were to tell you that someone else entered the room where your ring was taken and left fingerprints on the dressing table, someone with a criminal record, would that concern you? Wyatt didn't flinch. Only if they were mine. Poirot's eyes sharpened. But you wore gloves that night. I always do. Skin condition. A popular excuse lately, Poirot murmured. Back in the cab, Hastings exhaled. You think it's him? Poirot said nothing for a moment. No, he said at last. He is involved, but not the mastermind. He is too cautious, too tidy. He has soldier's instincts. So who then? Poirot looked out the window. Need one more piece of the puzzle. Something to connect the chain. When they returned home, a telegram was waiting. From Raymond Kessler, subject. Urgent body. Package from Vienna missing. Contents. A blue enamel box. May be linked. Please advise. Poirot's face turned grim. The box, he whispered. It was part of a pair. He retrieved the Bellamy guest list again and ran his finger down to one name. Dr. Agatha Pym Poirot smiled slowly. A collector, a chemist, a guest at the dinner, and the only one who asked to see Lord Bramhurst's cufflinks up close before dinner. Chapter 6. The final variable. A sharp knock echoed through Poirot's flat at precisely 9 the next morning. Captain Hastings, halfway through buttering toast, looked up as Miss Lemon showed in Inspector Japp. The detective looked more ruffled than usual, his hat clutched tightly in one hand. She's confessed, he said bluntly, the moment he stepped into the sitting room. Poirot did not seem surprised. He sipped his chocolate leisurely. Ah, the great Dr. Pym has admitted her guilt. Japp dropped into a chair. Not exactly. She's admitted to knowing Vale and to sending him to retrieve the box. Says she merely wanted her old possession back, never intended for anything more. Claims she gave him a sedative to keep him quiet, not kill him. Poirot arched a brow. How curious, especially when the compound in question has no sedative effects in low doses, and is deadly in moderate ones. Exactly. Still, Japp said, rubbing his temples, she's clever. The Crown will have to prove intent. She meant to kill him, Poirot said quietly. But that's not the question anymore. Japp looked up. It's not? Poirot stood and paced slowly to the window, hands clasped behind his back. She meant to kill Vale, yes, but she did not orchestrate the theft of the cufflinks. Hastings choked on his toast. I beg your pardon? Poirot turned slowly. She hired Vale to retrieve the music box. That was her only interest. She wanted it back, for sentimental reasons, or perhaps because she feared what was hidden inside. And the cufflinks? Japp asked. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone else took those. While Dr. Pym was focused on the box, another party had their eye on Lord Bramhurst's jewellery. Japp blinked. You're telling me we have two separate crimes executed the same night? Executed, Poirot said, with uncanny coordination. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings visited Lord Bramhurst at his family estate in Chelsea. The nobleman greeted them with his usual mix of charm and disdain. I hear congratulations are in order, he said, pouring a brandy for himself. You've caught the wicked doctor, but where are my cufflinks? That, Poirot replied, is precisely why we're here. Bramhurst raised an eyebrow. You're not satisfied? No, Poirot said, because your cufflinks were not in the box under the piano. Vale never touched them. The colour drained subtly from Bramhurst's face. What do you mean? I mean, Poirot said, pacing slowly across the Persian rug, that someone removed them before the performance, before Vale had any opportunity to steal them. I don't understand. Oh, but you do, Poirot said softly. You do, because you took them yourself. Bramhurst set down his glass with exaggerated care. This is absurd, is it? Poirot opened his coat pocket and withdrew a photograph, a magnified image of Bramhurst from the night of the dinner, captured by a guest's camera. In the photo, his left cuff gleamed with the sapphire square, his right empty. You wore only one cufflink that night, my lord. The other was already missing. Bramhurst laughed, but it rang hollow. An oversight. Poirot laid a velvet pouch on the table. Recovered from your study drawer yesterday, hidden beneath a stack of correspondence, along with an insurance claim dated the morning after the theft, for the full value of the pair. The nobleman's jaw clenched. You staged the theft, Poirot said, voice crisp. You assumed the chaos of the Vale incident would cloud scrutiny. And indeed, it nearly did. But why? Hastings asked, bewildered. Surely a man of your wealth— Wealth, Bramhurst muttered, is a fragile illusion. Investments failed. Estates bleed money. I needed the payout. The cufflinks were insured for £30,000. The cufflinks were insured for £30,000. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Didn't expect the pianist to drop dead mid-escape. Threw the whole plan into chaos. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And you did not consider that an innocent man might die?" "I didn't know there would be poison," Bramhurst snapped. "That was her, not me." Poirot stepped forward, and so two plots collided. One man's greed, another woman's paranoia, and in the middle, a thief with no loyalty to either. Japp entered the room then, having waited just outside. "You're under arrest, Lord Bramhurst, for fraud, obstruction, and theft. Let's hope the judge isn't a member of the Bellamy Club." Bramhurst didn't resist. He just sank into his chair as though he'd aged 10 years. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Hastings stared at the ceiling, still reeling. "I can't believe it. 2 schemes, 2 criminals. The odds." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but it is often in life and crime that independent variables collide." He turned one of the music boxes over in his hands. "There remains one last puzzle," he said softly. Hastings sat up. "What?" Poirot opened the second intact music box again. The melody played, and once more something beneath the lining caught his eye. He peeled it back gently. Tucked inside, a small diamond key. Poirot frowned. Hastings peered closer. "What's that unlock?" Poirot studied the key, then pulled a small square lockbox from his bookshelf. One he'd retrieved days earlier from Pym's flat and hadn't yet examined in full. The key fit. Inside was a letter, typed on yellowing paper. He read the first few lines, and his face changed. "Mon Dieu!" "What is it?" Poirot read aloud. "To whomever finds this, the box contains my final work, my formula, the Verdantine compound in stable form. Study it well, for its misuse would be catastrophic." It was signed M.V. Trakel. Hastings murmured. "Wasn't that Pym's old mentor? The Austrian chemist who vanished during the war?" Poirot nodded. "She didn't just want the box for sentiment. She wanted to ensure no one ever found this formula." He exhaled slowly. "She killed to bury it. Bramhurst stole to escape debt, and a pianist paid the price." He closed the box and looked out the window at the greying sky. "And still, people ask me," he said softly, "why I never underestimate the human heart." Chapter 5. The Chemist's Curiosity. It was late afternoon when Poirot rang the bell at Dr. Agatha Pym's flat in Bloomsbury. The residence was immaculate. Walls lined with scientific texts, antique curios, and a surprising number of butterflies pinned under glass. A faint smell of lavender hung in the air, masking something faintly metallic beneath. Dr. Pym answered the door herself. Her silver hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore a white blouse with pearl buttons, no nonsense in her stance or manner. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted, "and Captain Hastings, to what do I owe the honour?" Poirot gave a warm smile. "We would like a word with you, madam, concerning the Bellamy Club dinner." Pym gestured them in. "Of course, I've already spoken to the authorities, but you're welcome to whatever insights I can offer." "Tea? Merci, but no," Poirot replied. "Tell me, you admired Lord Bramhurst's cufflinks, did you not?" "I did," she said with a faint smile. "Sapphire, if I recall correctly. Stunning clarity, a rare square cut." "And you held them?" "I merely asked to examine them. I have a weakness for gems. Studied mineralogy as a young woman before turning to chemistry." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And chemistry has treated you well, it seems. Well enough, she replied. I teach, consult, and publish now. Poison has always been a professional interest, though I assure you, never a recreational one. Hastings raised an eyebrow. Poirot's smile didn't waver. Dr. Pym, he said smoothly, have you ever seen this before? He withdrew the shard of enamel from his pocket and placed it gently on a lace napkin atop her side table. She leaned in, her eyes flickering. Art Nouveau. Looks like part of a decorative box, chipped cleanly. Blue enamel with a Viennese design, if I'm not mistaken. You have a good eye. I used to collect things like this, she said. Sold most of it off when I moved back from Prague. Ah, Poirot said. Then perhaps you knew of Raymond Kessler's collection. Her tone didn't change. A few acquaintances overlap. Kessler is passionate. Indeed, Poirot said, and passionate men can be dangerous. Dr. Pym's gaze hardened slightly. So can presumptuous ones. Poirot rose. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. As they left the flat, Hastings glanced sideways. You didn't press her. Poirot's expression was unreadable. No, because she already told me what I needed. Once outside, Poirot paused under a street lamp. She knew too much, he said quietly. That shard. She identified the enamel, the design, even placed it in Vienna, all before I asked. She's an academic, Hastings offered. Maybe she really did know. Or maybe, Poirot said, she once owned the very box that housed the stolen items. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot turned his attention to a box he had been expecting. A courier had arrived during their visit to Pym's. A carefully wrapped parcel bearing the seal of a Viennese auction house. He slit the wrapping and opened it. Inside, a second music box, twin to the one left beside Declan Vale's body. Blue enamel, Art Nouveau, identical design, but this one was whole. He lifted it carefully. It played a delicate melody. Chopin, if he wasn't mistaken. As the tune tinkled out, Poirot opened the lid. Inside the velvet lining was a folded slip of paper. Hastings peered over his shoulder. To Agatha, for your brilliant mind and patient heart. M. Who's M? Hastings asked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not who, mon ami, but when. He pointed to the engraving inside the lid. A hallmark and a year. About 1907, he said, which means this box was gifted more than 20 years ago. She once owned both. Poirot returned to Scotland Yard the next morning and requested access to Vale's belongings again. He asked to examine the broken box more closely, not just for fingerprints, but for chemical residue. Jack frowned. You think it was poisoned? No, Poirot said, but I believe it carried poison. With gloved hands and a magnifying lens, he inspected the inner lining. There, found powdery traces tucked into the velvet edge. Poirot dipped a cloth in alcohol and blotted it gently. The cloth turned faintly green. A compound known as verdantine, he said. A synthetic compound derived from belladonna and arsenic, once used in small quantities as an anesthetic, now banned almost everywhere. Who would know how to make that? Poirot gave a grim smile. Someone with a professional interest in poisons. Someone with access to rare chemistry texts. Someone like Dr. Agatha Pym. That afternoon, Poirot summoned Lord Bramhurst, Raymond Kessler, and Julian Wyatt to a private salon at the Bellamy Club. A fire crackled in the hearth, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. Dr. Pym arrived last, punctual to the second. Poirot waited until they were all seated. "My friends," he began, "the theft at the Bellamy dinner was not merely a crime of opportunity. It was a performance, a composed work, with each of you playing your parts, some knowingly, others not." He turned to Bramhurst. "Your cufflinks were taken as a warning." "To me? No, to everyone." "A statement." To Kessler. "Your collection was scouted. The blue enamel box, yours once. But before you, it belonged to her." He looked at Dr. Pym. "Your signature, madame, was not the poison. It was the box." Dr. Pym tilted her head. "This is quite the narrative. Then allow me to conclude it." Poirot stood and walked to the mantel. "Declan Vale was your agent. You hired him to infiltrate the Bellamy dinner, posing as a pianist. He stole the valuables, placed them in the music box, and left it under the piano. To be collected later," Kessler said softly. "Correct. But Vale had other plans. He thought he could keep the goods and vanish." Poirot turned to the group. "He did not expect you to poison him, Dr. Pym." "I had no access," she said coolly. "But you had time. Before the dinner, you handled the cufflinks, perhaps even passed a word to Vale. And afterward, you met him at the Windmere Theatre, a place you once visited during your mineralogist days. You laced his drink. He never felt it." Pym stood abruptly. "You have no proof." Poirot walked to her seat. "I do. A match of the chemical in the box to your private collection. The twin box from Vienna, gifted to you decades ago. And most damning, this." He pulled a small slip of folded paper from his pocket and handed it to Japp. "Jack, read it aloud. To Agatha, for your brilliant mind and patient heart. The paper found in Vale's jacket. He carried it with him, perhaps as insurance, perhaps by mistake." Dr. Pym's composure faltered. "You think me a monster," she said softly. Poirot's voice was quiet. "I think you were once in love, perhaps with a man who left you that music box, perhaps with your work more than any man." He paused. "But a woman of science does not kill for love. She kills for control." Pym's expression hardened. "You think you've solved everything?" Poirot smiled gently. "No, madam, not everything, but enough to know this. You underestimated the importance of details, and it is always in the details where Hercule Poirot finds the truth." As Japp led Dr. Pym away, the others sat in stunned silence. Kessler broke it at last. "She would have gotten away with it." "Indeed," Poirot said, "but only if the box had remained hidden." Bramhurst scowled. "Over a pair of cufflinks?" Poirot shook his head. "No, monsieur. Over pride, and over the belief that the perfect crime can exist." He placed the twin music boxes side by side on the table. "One concealed theft," he murmured. "The other, a message from the past." He looked to Hastings. "Now, we must decide what to do with them." Chapter 6. The Final Variable. A sharp knock echoed through Poirot's flat at precisely 9 the next morning. Captain Hastings, halfway through buttering toast, looked up as Miss Lemon showed in Inspector Japp. The detective looked more ruffled than usual, his hat clutched tightly in one hand. "She's confessed," he said bluntly, the moment he stepped into the sitting-room. Poirot did not seem surprised. He sipped his chocolate leisurely. "Ah, the great Dr. Pym has admitted her guilt." Japp dropped into a chair. "Not exactly. She's admitted to knowing Vale and to sending him to retrieve the box. Says she merely wanted her old possession back, never intended for anything more. Claims she gave him a sedative to keep him quiet, not kill him." Poirot arched a brow. "How curious, especially when the compound in question has no sedative effects in low doses, and is deadly in moderate ones." "Exactly. Still," Japp said, rubbing his temples, "she's clever. The Crown will have to prove intent." "She meant to kill him," Poirot said quietly, "but that's not the question any more." Japp looked up. "It's not." Poirot stood and paced slowly to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "She meant to kill Vale, yes, but she did not orchestrate the theft of the cufflinks." Hastings choked on his toast. "I beg your pardon?" Poirot turned slowly. "She hired Vale to retrieve the music box. That was her only interest. She wanted it back, for sentimental reasons, or perhaps because she feared what was hidden inside." "And the cufflinks?" Japp asked. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone else took those. While Dr. Pym was focused on the box, another party had their eye on Lord Bramhurst's jewellery." Japp blinked. "You're telling me we have two separate crimes, executed the same night?" "Executed," Poirot said, with uncanny coordination. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings visited Lord Bramhurst at his family estate in Chelsea. The nobleman greeted them with his usual mix of charm and disdain. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said, pouring a brandy for himself. "You've caught the wicked doctor, but where are my cufflinks?" "That," Poirot replied, "is precisely why we're here." Bramhurst raised an eyebrow. "You're not satisfied?" "No," Poirot said, "because your cufflinks were not in the box under the piano. Vale never touched them." The colour drained subtly from Bramhurst's face. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Poirot said, pacing slowly across the Persian rug, "that someone removed them before the performance, before Vale had any opportunity to steal them." "I don't understand." "Oh, but you do," Poirot said softly. "You do, because you took them yourself." Bramhurst set down his glass with exaggerated care. "This is absurd." "Is it?" Poirot opened his coat pocket and withdrew a photograph, a magnified image of Bramhurst from the night of the dinner, captured by a guest's camera. In the photo, his left cuff gleamed with the sapphire square. His right, empty. "You wore only one cufflink that night, my lord. The other was already missing." Bramhurst laughed, but it rang hollow. "An oversight." Poirot laid a velvet pouch on the table. "Recovered from your study drawer yesterday. Hidden beneath a stack of correspondence, along with an insurance claim dated the morning after the theft, for the full value of the pair." The nobleman's jaw clenched. "You staged the theft," Poirot said, voice crisp. You assumed the chaos of the Vale incident would cloud scrutiny, and indeed it nearly did. But why? Hastings asked, bewildered. Surely a man of your wealth— Wealth, Bramhurst muttered, is a fragile illusion. Investments fail. Estates bleed money. I needed the payout. The cufflinks were insured for £30,000. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Didn't expect the pianist to drop dead mid-escape. Threw the whole plan into chaos. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you did not consider that an innocent man might die? I didn't know there would be poison, Bramhurst snapped. That was her, not me. Poirot stepped forward. And so, two plots collided. One man's greed, another woman's paranoia. And in the middle, a thief with no loyalty to either. Japp entered the room then, having waited just outside. You're under arrest, Lord Bramhurst, for fraud, obstruction, and theft. Let's hope the judge isn't a member of the Bellamy Club. Bramhurst didn't resist. He just sank into his chair as though he'd aged 10 years. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Hastings stared at the ceiling, still reeling. I can't believe it. 2 schemes, 2 criminals. The odds. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but it is often in life and crime that independent variables collide. He turned one of the music boxes over in his hands. There remains one last puzzle, he said, softly. Hastings sat up. What? Poirot opened the second intact music box again. The melody played, and once more something beneath the lining caught his eye. He peeled it back gently. Tucked inside, a small diamond key. Poirot frowned. Hastings peered closer. What's that unlock? Poirot studied the key, then pulled a small square lockbox from his bookshelf. One he'd retrieved days earlier from Pym's flat and hadn't yet examined in full. The key fit. Inside was a letter, typed on yellowing paper. He read the first few lines, and his face changed. Mon Dieu, what is it? Poirot read aloud. To whomever finds this, the box contains my final work, my formula, the verdantine compound in stable form. Hide it well, for its misuse would be catastrophic. It was signed M.V. Trackle. Trackle, Hastings murmured. Wasn't that Pym's old mentor? The Austrian chemist who vanished during the war? Poirot nodded. She didn't just want the box for sentiment. She wanted to ensure no one ever found this formula. He exhaled slowly. She killed to bury it. Bramhurst stole to escape debt, and a pianist paid the price. He closed the box and looked out the window at the greying sky. And still people ask me, he said softly, why I never underestimate the human heart. Chapter Narrated. 7. Shadows in Prague. The fog hung low over London the next morning, dampening the air with a metallic chill that clung to the skin. Hercule Poirot sat quietly in his armchair, the music box open on the table beside him. The diamond key lay nestled against a velvet cloth, while the letter signed M.V. Trackle rested beside a steaming cup of chocolate. Across the room, Hastings paced restlessly. So this formula, verdantine, how dangerous is it really? He asked, glancing at the letter again. Poirot's face was sombre. It is more than a poison, Hastings. Verdantine is a compound of rare precision. In small amounts, it can render a man unconscious for hours without harm. In larger doses, it kills without a trace. Undetectable. To the untrained, yes. But more dangerous still is what Dr. Trockle wrote here, the compound in stable form. Verdantine was once volatile. It degraded quickly. If Pym held the stable version, then anyone with access to it could manufacture it en masse. Poirot nodded. Imagine it in the hands of governments or criminals. It would be the perfect tool for assassination, coercion, and war. Hastings whistled. Then she wasn't just covering her tracks. She was protecting the world. Perhaps. But the method was still murder. There was a knock at the door. Miss Lemon entered, holding a telegram. Poirot opened it slowly. Incoming inquiry from Vienna regarding missing Trockle papers. Agent in London to make contact. Urgent. Embassy attaché. Poirot folded the paper without a word. Vienna? Hastings asked. More chemists? No, Poirot said. Someone looking for Trockle's work. Perhaps someone who never stopped. Looking. That evening, Poirot and Hastings took a cab to the Austrian Cultural Institute near South Kensington. The building, with its grand neoclassical facade, glowed warmly in the dusk. Inside, a tall man with a precise haircut and a sharply tailored coat greeted them in accented English. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, I am Emile Ressler. I believe we have much to discuss. They sat in a quiet study off the main hall. Ressler poured tea with clockwork movements, then produced a faded photograph. It showed a group of scientists in a Viennese laboratory, circa 1912. A young Agatha Pym stood beside a man with intense eyes and a beard. Dr. Trockle, this is the only known photograph, Ressler said. Dr. Trockle's work vanished after 1914, but we now believe fragments were smuggled to England. You are in possession of one such fragment. Poirot did not deny it. Ressler leaned in. Verdantine was never a weapon, monsieur. It was meant to be an anesthetic for battlefield surgeries, but it was unstable. Trockle never perfected it. Yet Dr. Pym had the stable compound. Ressler nodded, which means she either improved it or completed his formula. Hastings spoke up. So are you here to destroy it or collect it? Ressler didn't answer immediately. Our concern is containment. If word of this compound spreads, others will come, not just scientists. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You are not simply a cultural attaché. No, Ressler said simply. I work with a scientific protection directive in Vienna. Unofficial, but necessary. Poirot steepled his fingers. Then let us speak plainly. What do you want? Ressler paused. The letter and the key. So we may verify, then suppress. Poirot stood and walked slowly to the hearth. You believe you are doing what is right. So did Dr. Pym. And yet a man lies dead. You would keep it? Poirot turned. No, monsieur. But I must know who else is searching before I give you anything. Ressler's eyes flicked up. What do you mean? Poirot opened a folder on the side table and passed Ressler a photograph. A still from a traffic camera near the Bellamy Club the night of Vail's death. It showed a dark sedan, stopped briefly behind the building. The plates were traced to a diplomatic rental, Poirot said, issued not to Austria, but to Prague. Ressler's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened. Someone else arrived that night, Poirot continued. and they too were looking for Charcoal's formula. Rustler stood, tense. Then we are already late. That night, Poirot slept little. His thoughts turned not to Dr. Pym, nor to Vale, but to the identity of the shadow player from Prague. What motive would drive someone to risk appearing at a private dinner, possibly even collaborating with Pym or Vale? The next morning, Hastings returned from a visit to Scotland Yard, cheeks red from the wind. Poirot. Jap says Pym's refusing further interviews, but she passed a message to you. He handed over a folded paper. In clipped script, they'll come for the second box. You have only days. Check the bell mechanism. There's something I hid. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. She hid something else, not just the letter. Together, they opened the second music box once more. This time Poirot used tweezers to gently remove the tiny brass bell attached to the winding mechanism. Inside the hollow clapper was a sliver of paper, rolled tightly. He unfurled it. Formula sequence incomplete. Needs heat-stabilizing catalyst. B. Emeraldine base. He looked at Hastings. She didn't finish it. She was close. But without this final catalyst, the compound remains inert. That's good, isn't it? Only if no one else discovers it. But Poirot's expression was troubled. If Pym feared someone might complete the formula, it means someone else has access to Charcoal's early work. Perhaps even his original notebooks. Hastings went pale. And if they do, then the real danger has not yet begun. Back at his flat, Poirot penned a letter, not to Rustler, but to the British Ministry of Science and War. The matter, he decided, had grown beyond any single agency. Still, he kept the formula locked in, his safe. As he turned the key and spun the combination, Hastings said quietly, "Do you trust Rustler?" Poirot shook his head. "I trust no one in this matter." "Not yet." He looked again at the music box. Beautiful, delicate, deadly. It began with a pair of cufflinks. Poirot said softly, "And now we stand at the edge of a secret war." Folded his hands, and I, Hercule Poirot, must now prepare for what comes next. Chapter 8. The Watchers in the Fog. The morning mist had thickened into a heavy hanging fog that blanketed London like a shroud. From the windows of Whitehaven mansions, the world appeared as nothing more than a blur of street lamps and spectral silhouettes. But within Poirot's sitting room, everything was crisp, clear, and painfully precise. Poirot stood before his fireplace, arms folded, the twin music boxes now side by side on the mantel. The two-chained, recovered fragment of Charcoal's formula lay between them, flattened and pressed between two panes of glass. Nearby, the tiny diamond key rested atop his closed notebook, the record of every deception, theft, and death thus far. Across the room, Hastings watched him, unease twisting his features. "You're thinking of Pym's warning?" Poirot gave a small nod. She feared the formula would fall into the wrong hands, but she also feared that someone already possessed part of it. And I believe she was right. He gestured toward the safe. "This box no longer holds just a chemical curiosity, Hastings. It is bait." There was a knock at the door. Miss Lemon entered, unusually tense. "A man to see you, Mr. Poirot. Said he was sent by the Austrian embassy. He has no card, but insists it is urgent." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, then gave a single nod. "Show him in." The man who entered was not Emile Ressler. He was taller, thinner, with a waxed black moustache and dark eyes that moved constantly, sizing the room, assessing exits, cataloguing details. "I am Dr. Stefan Kravik," he said with a clipped accent. "I am here regarding the Traco dossier." Poirot's smile was thin. "Strange, monsieur. I expected someone else." Ressler was recalled. Kravik said smoothly. "A conflict of jurisdiction." Kravik said smoothly. "A conflict of jurisdiction. I now represent the Prague delegation." "I see," Poirot said. "You have recovered materials believed to have originated from Dr. Trakel's final experiments. It is imperative that these be returned to their country of origin." "Prague?" Hastings said, startled. "But Trakel was Austrian." Kravik did not flinch. He worked in both regions. His lab was funded by a Prague financier. His archives were split. "And you believe Dr. Pym was hiding some of them here in London?" "I know she was, and I know she intended to destroy them." Poirot studied Kravik carefully. "You seem unusually well informed." Kravik met his gaze evenly. "Our office has been tracking Verdantine research for nearly a decade." "You believe the formula is dangerous?" Kravik smiled, the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. "I believe knowledge is only dangerous in the wrong hands. And who decides the right ones?" "That," Kravik said coolly, "is not your concern." Poirot stepped closer. "Then permit me to make it so. What do you know of Declan Vale?" Kravik's smile vanished. "He was not part of our operation." "But you were there," Poirot said. "Your men, your car, your agents watched the Bellamy Club, followed Vale, perhaps even followed Pym." Kravik's voice tightened. "We observed, nothing more." Poirot moved to the mantel and gently picked up the flattened sliver of paper. "This contains the final catalytic hint. Without it, the formula remains inert. Dr. Pym left it behind because she believed someone might try to recreate the compound, someone outside the British or Austrian authorities." "And what will you do with it?" Kravik asked quietly. "I will keep it safe," Poirot said, "until I know where it truly belongs." Kravik's expression didn't change, but the tension in his shoulders sharpened. Poirot nodded slightly. "You are welcome to leave your contact details with Miss Lemon." Kravik hesitated, then dipped into his coat and withdrew a card, unmarked, except for a telephone number typed in block font. He handed it over without a word and departed. The door clicked shut. Hastings exhaled. "He gave me the shivers." Poirot tapped the card gently. "Then your instincts serve you well. He is no cultural attaché. He is interested, Hastings. Interested in ways men like Ressler are not." "You think he's here for more than the formula?" "I think he may already have part of it." Poirot sat down, fingers steepled, "and I believe he intends to ensure no one else does." That evening, the city's fog turned black with rain. Poirot, under a dark umbrella, returned once more to the Windermere Theatre. Its rotting doors and crumbling facade loomed like the setting of a Gothic novel. But Poirot saw not ghosts. He saw echoes, movements, patterns. He moved through the ruined lobby to the backstage corridor, flashlight in hand. The police had long since cleared the scene of Vale's death, but Poirot knew something had been overlooked. He stopped beside the orchestra pit. There, where the floorboards curved toward the shadows, a pile of debris had gone undisturbed. Old programs, cigarette butts, a bent tuning fork, and a matchbox. Poirot picked it up. On the side was the logo of a Prague music conservatory. Inside, one match remained, its tip stained green. Poirot turned it over and smiled grimly. "Not Verdantine," he murmured, "but something else. Perhaps a primer, a test." He pocketed the matchbox and left the theatre. At Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot worked late into the night. He cross-referenced every article and intelligence report he could find on Treacle's wartime affiliations. And in one dusty monograph, published in Zurich, he found the phrase Project Sapphire. A side note, dismissed by scholars. But Poirot's mind did not dismiss things. He rose and retrieved the original insurance claim filed by Lord Bramhurst. The one pertaining to the Sapphire, cufflinks. He laid the two documents side by side. 2 sapphires, Poirot whispered. One a gem, the other a code name. His gaze narrowed. The theft was not merely about jewelry. He rang Miss Lemon. "Please contact Inspector Jack immediately. Tell him I require access to Bramhurst's private safe, and tell him to bring the cufflink." By midday, Poirot, Hastings and Japp stood in the library of Bramhurst's Chelsea estate. The nobleman, now considerably less imperious, watched nervously as Poirot examined the single recovered cufflink. Poirot took a jeweller's glass to it, then he twisted the setting. With a soft click, the sapphire slid aside, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside, a tiny microfilm strip. Poirot turned. The real jewel was not the stone. It was the secret inside it. Japp let out a low whistle. "Hidden message." Poirot nodded. Perhaps data, perhaps coordinates. But one thing is now clear. Bramhurst was a courier. Bramhurst's face paled. "I never knew," he whispered. "They were my grandfather's. Family heirloom." "Then someone knew," Poirot said, "and targeted you deliberately." He handed the cufflink to Japp. "Have this examined by your cipher team, and prepare for more questions." That evening, Poirot sat at his desk, watching the rain streak down the glass like ink trails. Hastings brought him tea, but said nothing. Finally, Poirot looked up. "Hastings, the sapphire cufflinks were only the beginning. The music boxes, the formula, the code, all of it leads to a much older secret, one buried during the war. And now it stirs again. You think there's more to come?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, but this time the stakes are not about stolen jewelry or old grudges." He looked toward the music boxes. "Silent now. They are about power, knowledge, and who dares claim ownership of it." He stood, and Hercule Poirot must decide whether to protect the truth or destroy it. Chapter 9. The cipher beneath the stone. Poirot stared down at the cufflink now encased in a glass evidence tube, watching the sapphire's sheen catch the lamplight with quiet menace. It sat innocently enough on Inspector Japp's desk at Scotland Yard, but what it represented was anything but innocent. "You're telling me," Japp said slowly, that this thing has been... You're telling me, Japp said slowly, that this thing has been sitting on Lord Bramhurst's dresser for years, hiding microfilm? Poirot nodded. Not just any microfilm, one of the last unrecovered transmissions from a wartime courier network. The Trackle files. That is my belief, Poirot said. Though what specific content it contains, I cannot yet say. Japp picked up the film with tweezers and turned it toward the light. It's tiny, barely enough space for a few lines. Which makes it perfect, Poirot said, for a cipher. Hastings, standing nearby, frowned. But what would be the point of hiding a cipher in a cufflink of all things? Why not just destroy it? Poirot clasped his hands. Because some secrets, mon ami, are never meant to be erased, only delayed. By that evening, the microfilm had been examined by Scotland Yard's decoding division. What they found were numbers. No words, no coordinates, no clear structure. Just 5 sets of 2-digit codes, 38 to 22, 44, 19, 17, 32, 50, 41, 21 to 28. To the untrained eye, gibberish. But to Poirot, they spoke with the weight of history. These are not random, he said, seated once again in the safety of Whitehaven Mansions. They are reference markers. For what? Hastings asked. Poirot opened one of his many wartime files and pulled a fold-out map from 1944, an old intelligence network overlay. On it were locations across Europe, safe houses, storage depots, and cryptography bunkers, abandoned or destroyed by war. He placed a ruler across the numbers, latitude and library references, a code disguised as a route. He tapped the third pair, 17 to 32. This one matches an archival catalogue I recall from the British Museum's restricted collection. The section housing post-war correspondence from Prague. Trackle's correspondence was held there for a brief time before being moved or stolen. By Pym, Hastings asked. Perhaps. Or by someone working with her. Poirot stood. It is time to revisit the archive. The British Museum's restricted reading room was a place of hushed reverence and silent suspicion. Security had been increased in recent years, especially in the aftermath of several high-profile thefts. But Poirot's name, combined with a discreet note from Japp, opened doors with only minimal resistance. Inside, they were met by the archive's custodian, a stooped man named Cleaver, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that squinted even with spectacles. We're looking for correspondence indexed under the number 1732, Poirot said politely. Cleaver frowned and flicked through a leather-bound ledger. Odd, he muttered. That reference was marked as withdrawn. Transferred to off-site storage in 1949. Destination unlisted. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Unlisted? Yes, that happened occasionally. Sensitive wartime material. I can show you what's left under that classification, but I doubt it will be useful. Merci, monsieur. Please do. They followed him through the lower stacks until they reached a narrow aisle lined with dust-coated boxes. Cleaver retrieved one labeled 17 to 32A. Inside were only 2 documents. The first, a carbon copy of a transfer order with the signature redacted. The second, a handwritten note in check dont Poirot scanned the note and translated aloud. To the Keeper of the Flame. If you have found this, then Verdantine was never buried deeply enough. Protect it, or destroy it, but do not let them weaponize beauty. He fell silent, Hastings frowned. Cryptic. Poirot's face was unreadable, but not meaningless. This note, like the cufflink, is a signpost, one that tells us Fertantine was not just chemistry. It was ideology, a temptation to those who wished to hold power in silence. Cleaver shuffled beside them. "One thing, sir. That box you're looking at, it was requested 6 months ago by someone else." Poirot turned sharply. "Who?" Cleaver hesitated. Name was Dr. Stephen Cravick. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot retrieved the matchbox he had taken from the Windermere Theatre. The logo, Prague Conservatory, was now matched with Cravick's name and the box number from the British Museum. The connections were no longer theoretical. They were closing. "He's not just interested in suppressing the formula," Poirot said. "He's after the full research. He's traced its survival across decades and now wants the only known, complete key." "Which is the note from Pym," Hastings said. "We, and the sample in her possession. A trace of the stabilized compound was found in her flat. It's likely she reproduced the process once and then destroyed it. That's what she claimed. But now," Poirot tapped the safe behind his desk, "we must assume someone else may try again." The phone rang. Poirot answered, listened, and his eyes narrowed. He hung up. That was Japp. "There's been an attempted break-in at the forensic vault." Hastings paled. "The microfilm?" "No. The box. The second music box was taken. The crime scene was unsettlingly precise. The vault's magnetic lock had been overridden. The only missing item was the enamel box, left behind as meaningless decor, now reclaimed by someone who knew exactly what it held. No fingerprints, no forced entry. "They used a coded access card," Japp said, frustrated. "One from an embassy clearance level." "Cravick," Hastings whispered. Poirot remained still. "Perhaps. Or someone he's working with." "But the microfilm's still here," Japp added. "They didn't take it." Poirot stared at the remaining sapphire cufflink now secured in a steel case. "Because they don't know it was the cipher. Not yet." He turned away, his voice grim. "But they will." That night, Poirot gathered the fragments on his desk. The microfilm cipher, Pym's hidden formula note, the sapphire cufflink, the stolen music box, each piece alone meaningless, together deadly. He retrieved a worn envelope from his top drawer, a sealed letter marked only with his initials. "I have written a statement," he told Hastings quietly. "If something should happen to me, it must be delivered to Inspector Japp immediately." Hastings blinked. "You think you're in danger?" "I know I am, but not for the usual reasons. This case is no longer about guilt or innocence. It's about access." He turned back. "Longer about guilt or innocence. Is about access." He turned back to the map of Prague and Vienna, now spread across his desk. "Someone will come again, and when they do, I must be ready." Outside, the fog coiled tighter around the city, but inside, Poirot's resolve was clear. Chapter 10. The Sapphire Veiled was just after 9 when Poirot arrived at the Bellamy Club for what would be his final gathering connected to the case. The fog had thinned to a pearly mist, and the gas lamps flickered like the eyes of discreet watchers. Inside, the club had been returned to its usual hush. No signs remained of theft, scandal, or death. The Persian rugs had been vacuumed, The portraits dusted. The fire, as ever, crackled with aristocratic indifference. But Poirot had not come for comfort. He had come to set a trap. He stood in the oak lounge, hands folded behind his back, gazing at the grand piano. On the low table beside it sat the sapphire cufflink, now reunited with its twin, courtesy of Inspector Japp and Scotland Yard's forensic team. It gleamed like a jewel of myth, belying the secret it had carried for years. Across from him stood Lord Bramhurst, Raymond Kessler, Julian Wyatt, and, at Poirot's request, Emile Rösler. "Gentlemen," Poirot said, his voice calm, "tonight I bring closure to this affair. But before we proceed, you must all understand one thing. The sapphire cufflinks were never the true prize. They were camouflage, decoys. What was hidden inside them, however, was of profound consequence." Rösler nodded gravely. "We have confirmed it. The microfilm contains the cipher key to a broader network of Verdantine research. Fragments, coordinates, partial data entries. We believe it's one of 5 such keys." "And the others?" asked Kessler. "Lost, perhaps destroyed, but one remains." He glanced at Poirot. "And now it is in the open." Poirot tapped the cufflink with a gloved finger. "But you see, monsieur, it was not I who exposed it, nor was it Dr. Pym or the unfortunate Vale. It was someone else, someone who sought to recover it, not to suppress its danger, but to use it." Lord Bramhurst stiffened. "You're not suggesting—" "No, no, my lord," Poirot interrupted. "You were a pawn, a vain, arrogant one, yes, who staged a theft for insurance purposes, but hardly a mastermind. No, the true mind behind this affair has been watching all along, cloaked in diplomatic privilege and obfuscation." He turned slowly toward the doorway, just as a figure entered, Dr. Stephen Kravick. The room fell quiet. "You were not invited," Poirot said, his voice steely. Kravick offered a tight smile. "But I came all the same. I thought you might wish to hand the key over, quietly." Poirot gave a smee bow. "Ah, but you mistake me, monsieur. I have no intention of being quiet." He motioned toward Japp, who entered behind Kravick, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. The surprise on Kravick's face was genuine, and very brief. "Dr. Kravick," Japp said, "you are being detained under suspicion of espionage, unauthorized possession of restricted documents, and attempted tampering with evidence held in custody by the Crown." Kravick's expression did not shift. "You cannot touch me. I have diplomatic immunity." Poirot stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You forfeited that immunity when you broke into a government facility, monsieur. Your embassy has already been contacted. They have chosen not to intervene." That struck a nerve. Kravick's jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" "No, monsieur," Poirot said softly. "I think I have delayed your victory, and for now that is enough." As Kravick was led from the room, Poirot turned back to the others. "There remains one final matter," he said. "The microfilm and the formula note recovered from Dr. Pym had been submitted to a secure tribunal. They will not be studied, published, or weaponized. They will be locked away." Kessler folded his arms. "And the music box?" "Destroyed. The twin box remains, for aesthetic purposes only." Lord Bramhurst gave a tight nod. then it's finished." Poirot shook his head. "No, because the idea of Ferdinand still exists. And so long as that idea lingers, someone will search for it." He walked slowly to the fireplace. "It is not the formula itself that poses danger. It is the ambition it awakens in those who seek to control it." Kessler exhaled. "Then I suppose it's a good thing we had you, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot gave a small, weary smile. "I am but one man, a small candle against a vast and spreading darkness, but I do what I can." Later that evening, as the fire dwindled and the Bellamy Club resumed its quiet rhythm, Poirot and Hastings stood outside beneath the mist-laced street lamps. "Do you think it's truly over?" Hastings asked. Poirot glanced toward the sky. "For it now. But there is no end to secrets, mon ami. Only temporary silences. And Cravick? He will vanish, perhaps be traded in some shadowed diplomatic corridor. But he will not be forgotten. Men like him seldom fade entirely." They walked slowly back to Whitehaven Mansions. Hastings broke the silence. "It started with a cufflink. Just one. And now we're talking about espionage, chemical warfare, secret codes." Poirot smiled. "C'est la vie. The smallest detail often unravels the grandest schemes. That, Hastings, is why we must never overlook a cracked clasp, a broken hinge, or a missing sapphire." When they returned home, Poirot placed the intact music box on the mantel. The melody played one final time, delicate, mournful. He folded the velvet note from Trécourt and slipped it into an envelope marked "to be opened only if necessary." Then he turned to Hastings. "Now," he said, "let us have tea, and never speak of this again, unless the world forces us to." And so the case of the sapphire cufflinks came to an end. The club's silence resumed. The papers moved on, but deep in the quiet corners of Poirot's memory, the echo of a broken tune remained, fragile, haunting, and unfinished. For some mysteries end not with answers, but with the certainty that more questions are waiting just beneath the surface, beneath the sapphire veil.